Welcome everyone to today's webinar, where we're going to explore the results and insights from our survey of nonprofit leaders. I wanted to introduce our panel and thank them for their work on the survey and the webinar. Susan Kelly is the CEO of Kelly Strategies, a born fundraiser and strategist. She advises nonprofits on development planning, fundraising strategy, revenue forecasting, and capital campaigns. Our second panelist, Suzanne Smith, is the CEO of Social Impact Architects. She is a strategy consultant to nonprofits on strategic planning, growth strategies, social innovation, and earned income. Our third panelist is Kim Bulger. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at Atigro. She advises nonprofits on digital engagement, content marketing, effective websites, and online thought leadership. My name is John Gillespie. I lead the nonprofit and social enterprise practice at Charles River CFO. As an outsourced CFO, I advise nonprofits on financial operations, profitability, budgeting, and recording. Susan, let's go to the next slide. So today we ask you to mute yourself during the presentation. You can obviously toggle your video on or off. Please use the chat box for questions. Each panelist will be presenting a section of the survey. At the end of that, we're going to have questions and answers. Please put your questions in the chat box, and then Kim will moderate the chat at the end of the session. Okay, next slide. So our collective goal in this 2021 survey was to understand the most important leadership priorities across 5 dimensions: innovation, finance, development, technology, and digital. And the value to nonprofits, for those who took the survey and obviously they're attending this webinar, is you can compare your feedback with peers in the nonprofit sector. You will receive some tailored advice you can take back to your organization to implement. That will be from every panelist. And we're going to have additional insights through our Q&A and custom feedback. The value to funders is to understand the pain points for nonprofits and how to best assist them with recovery efforts, and to help rethink grant strategy to address those priorities. I also want to thank our survey distribution partners that made this event a success. Bauer & Company, Caliber CPA, Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires, and the New Jersey Historical Commission. Okay, next slide. So the survey participants, 86% were CEOs, executive directors, or C-level executives. The other 14% were development and program managers. You can see from the nonprofit sectors to the right, 84% were mission-oriented, 16% were associations and policy organizations. 3/4 of the participants are in the $1 to $5 million range, and that correlates almost directly with the national demographic for nonprofits. And they also had 1 to 50 employees. You can see the revenue size is broken out here. 50% less than $1 million. That's the big number. 28%, 1 to 5 million. And then you can see the number of employees, 57%, 1 to 10, 15%, 11 to 25, and so on. Next slide. So what was a great insight for us as we reviewed the survey results is, after a challenging 2020, new opportunities are beginning to emerge. Questions like, how do I recalibrate my strategy based on the new paradigm? How do I stay connected with clients and patrons to best understand need? How do I build a more inclusive and diverse organization? How do I embrace changes associated with technology? And how do I maintain relevance and improve our ability to demonstrate value? How do I communicate with funders and donors in the most effective way? What we found that is 70% of the survey takers are expecting growth in 2021, which is a very positive sign. Only 6% see revenue contracting from 2020. In the hiring, which obviously is another key indicator, 12% are going to hire more than 3+ staff, 30% are going to hire 1 to 2 staff, and a very, very small portion are going to be contracting their staff. Okay, next slide. Now I want to introduce Suzanne Smith, who's going to talk about strategy, innovation, and impact.
Hi, everybody. We are muting everybody, so unfortunately I got muted early on. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the survey. I know a number of you who are on this call are folks I have directly communicated with as clients and as funders and as friends in this sector. But this survey was critically important because I think we go into 2021 with a lot of unknowns. And so from a strategy perspective, we really want to think about what makes sense for nonprofits, as well as what can funders do to best assist nonprofits in 2021 and beyond. So the theme that I really felt going into the strategy and innovation section, based on the survey results, but based on my experience talking with my clients in the nonprofit space, which are both funders as well as researchers and nonprofits, was really the word reset. And let me tell you a little bit about why I think that word is the most appropriate right now. You probably are familiar with the word that everybody's using, the word pivot. And I think that I heard on one recent phone call that that is the last word people want to hear right now. It's certainly something that's been overused, but I also think importantly, it's not the right word for where we are right now. If you're familiar with the origin of pivot, pivot is really a minor change that you're trying to make, a course correction. And reset is really about talking about the game itself. So if you're familiar with game theory, so Sun Tzu and all of that, reset really gives you an opportunity to change the game overall. And I think we're at that point, not only because of COVID, because of our economy, because of the strenuous nature that COVID has put on our public health system and education sectors. It really is incumbent upon us from a strategy point of view to really hit the reset button and to think about where do we want the sector to go in 2021 and 2022? So it's really about changing the game overall. So it's why I am kind of saying that moving forward, we're actually moving into what I'm calling the great nonprofit reset, recognizing that everything from your mission to your culture has evolved as a result of all the macro trends that have existed in 2020, from diversity and inclusion to COVID-19, to the stress and the strain on the arts sector, education, public health, and beyond, to really recalibrate everything in 2021 and give us an opportunity almost to leapfrog our existing business models and rethink everything. So if you think about it in terms of games, we're moving from playing checkers to playing chess in our strategy. Next slide. So the survey results show this, that a number of you nonprofits specifically are looking at lots of different things. How to improve your program metrics, how to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at potentially new mission focus, as well as other innovative initiatives. Much like in the Great Recession, we saw more and more nonprofits investing in social enterprise. We see that playing out after 2021 as well. Next slide. So let's talk about this, and let's talk about these key trends and predictions. And the speakers were prepping yesterday, and these are all areas where we hope in the Q&A you'll engage us on this conversation. We each could write a dissertation about each of these things. So we hope we'll have a lively conversation at the very end about these key trends as well as predictions. As many of you know who follow my blog, Social Trend Spotter, part of what I think is important to nonprofits when they're developing their strategy is to figure out their line of sight, their horizon, where things are going to go. So one of the key trends I think we're finding in the nonprofit space right now is that the line of sight is pretty short. There's a lot of unknowns going on right now. In fact, many of our participants are from the state of Texas, and we have a lot of unknowns associated with what happened to us last week and the ramifications that that's going to have on income inequality and other elements. So one of the key trends we're seeing with our clients, as well as the people that in the communities that we're serving, is instead of having strategic plans, people are really thinking about battle plans, recognizing that in 2021, there probably will continue to be a lot of change, a lot of political changes as well. And really having a concrete battle plan is probably the best way to go. Within 2022, really thinking things strategically once things are more known. So I think a key trend is really right-sizing your planning process. We recommend to our clients that they can use battle plans to really think about an action plan for 2021 or as an adjustment or a course correction to an existing strategic plan. Another key trend is that growth is now not only just wide, as it typically is in the for-profit space, but it's also deep. So how do we go deeper with the people that we're serving? In addition, we're seeing in the 21st century, many nonprofits who are going beyond just program delivery and recognizing that social change comes in many forms, including policy, movements, collaboration, and system change. So more and more nonprofits are dabbling along the edges of social change and doing more than just programs to seek the change for the folks that they serve. As the survey indicated, we're also looking at impact management, and not just for programs. I see more and more nonprofits who are actually creating logic models for their finance departments, their HR departments, and really seeing it as part of their culture. So embedding learning and design into their actual learning processes. And then of course, as a result of all the things that happened in 2020, the nonprofit sector is centering itself around equity, as it should. So we see that as being a real core value, not just from a cultural perspective, but embedded in every decision that organizations are making. So a couple of predictions, some things I think you're going to see over the next couple of years and are probably already seeing in your organizations. I think we're going to see an increased dominance of boards and executive teams. We're going to need people who are steering these organizations who are really paying attention to every shift and change that is happening. And the changes are going to be much more dynamic, as I indicated earlier. So I think that's going to be something we'll be recognizing over time. And so it's going to be important that we invest in the leaderships of those particular groups. And Kim's going to be talking about this a little bit later, but one of the things I've talked quite a bit about in the blogs is that technology is no longer a vertical. It's really a horizontal that impacts every aspect of your nonprofit organization, which means that technology proficiency will soon be the key competitive advantage of most nonprofits. In addition, culture is going to continue to be a priority for nonprofits. Talent is the great differentiator of any nonprofit. So we're going to see culture continue to play a role, but obviously we're going to see the same shifts that the for-profit space will as employees come back to work and we're rethinking employment scenarios. We also are seeing more and more nonprofits who are moving upstream. So recognizing again that their role is not only downstream doing the direct work, but recognizing that there are things happening upstream in policy that they can actually make a difference in. So you see many more nonprofits getting involved in community solutions and many more nonprofits kind of coming together as intermediaries, negotiating those community situations. And then of course, we see many nonprofits who are now really steadying themselves and really thinking about the role that they play in equity and becoming anti-racist organizations. Next slide. So what does this mean for all of you? I know we've got folks on the phone that represent national organizations, local organizations, big organizations, small organizations. And so here's some of the things that we would recommend both with nonprofits as well as some of the funders on this call. First, I think in 2021, in the short term, I encourage nonprofits to do a battle plan to come out stronger. Again, there's a lot of unknowns on the horizon, and while we still need to monitor them, it is really incumbent upon us to come out stronger as a result of the work that we've been doing. So focusing on some of the things that we'll be talking about today, technology, finances, and impact will make you stronger. Then shifting into a strategic plan in 2022 to really make sure we're thinking about our competitive strategy. And to that end, part of what we need to do in 2022 is recognize that all of our data is probably now wrong. We actually have to think differently about the work that we're doing. So we have to throw out the existing data that we have around those people that we're serving because so many things have changed in their lives and in our lives, and conduct needs assessments with paired measures, not just quantitative, but qualitative, to truly understand what your customers and patrons really need now to achieve your mission. So again, the game board is completely changing. And so it means that we're going to have to pay attention to what's happening in the game and make sure we're adjusting our programs, our services, and our shows accordingly. I also think this means we've got to upgrade our board rosters. So in the areas where we're potentially weak, we need to find people who can potentially help us in those areas. It also requires board members to engage in active governance and make sure that that active governance is always a priority. Then focusing on culture is a key differentiator. I've said all along that I can give an organization a good strategy, but I can't give them a good culture. And when I look at the organizations that I've worked with over the past couple of years, the organizations that have come through COVID-19, the economic situation, and even the recent storms in Texas the best are the ones that have had a strong culture. And so that culture is going to be a real critical component, not only in attracting and retaining talent, but really making sure that we're embracing the communities that we serve and co-creating alongside them. So for funders, I think you can offer capacity building as well as unrestricted funding to support upgrades. In addition, I think there's going to be a community shift toward data-driven decision-making. So to the extent that funders can actually fund this and actually maybe even fund some of this needs assessment work so that individual nonprofits don't have to do it, but we can be doing it collectively to see how needs have changed and evolved as a result of the last couple of years. And then bringing in training, coaching, and technical assistance. I also think most of the nonprofits I know still want to do equity training and want to go deeper in their work in equity. So the extent that funders can fund this, but also fund it jointly with other nonprofits, I think that can actually be a win-win scenario for many funders and nonprofits. And finally, because we're going to need great talent in this space to help us continue to come out stronger and wiser as a result of the COVID-19 and economic conditions, we're going to need an all-in mentality. So the more board members, the more students, the more volunteers we have that are specifically suited for the nonprofit space and for the issues that we're facing today, the better off we're going to be. So funders can support volunteer initiatives and recruitment at a macro level. That's going to make the lives of nonprofits that much easier. So those are just some ideas. I hope that moving forward, you have some questions for us in the Q&A, and I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Susan, to talk to you about the fundraising side of things.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. Happy to be here with all of you today. As Suzanne noted, I'm going to be talking to you about the fundraising and development priority that was outlined in the survey, which I think the survey results came through loud and clear that all of you are concerned about your revenue model and specifically your charitable fundraising efforts. So to go along with the theme of today's presentation, the word that I've selected to really lead us through 2021 is amplify. As I think about the nonprofits that I've spoken with and the results of the survey, we did have a lot of nonprofits in certain sectors that had a very challenging fundraising year and a loss of revenue to that effect. However, on the other side, we had a lot of nonprofits that had their best fundraising year ever. So I hope that the guidance that I'll take you through over the next few minutes will really be for all types of organizations, regardless of how you fared in 2020. But certainly the focus is going to be on retaining donors. It's a very competitive climate, and I think it's becoming increasingly so due to the lingering effects of COVID and other kind of national themes that we're seeing, which also makes it a really great opportunity to, as Suzanne said, rethink the model, go back to that chessboard and explore new grant and prospect partnerships. And furthermore, I don't want 2021 to be the year that we do our annual development plan as we have always done. This is going to be a year to rethink, recalibrate, and also think about what are those new goals. Specifically, if you're thinking about testing a campaign in the next few years, this might actually be a great year to do it. I think major donors are really primed to rise to the occasion of additional funding opportunities. So looking at just the key survey findings from over 200 nonprofit leaders that responded, 60% are really pointing to individual giving, grants, and the need to diversify fundraising sources. I would say that that is par for the course of what I've always heard from nonprofits. They really see tremendous opportunity in individual giving as it relates to all levels of giving, annual, mid-level, and major level, and then also the grant prospects. We did have about 29% of folks that pointed to the idea of corporate sponsorships, maybe for events or virtual events, and also membership-based organizations that are really focused on retaining the members that they do have and continuing to provide value add for them. So key trends that I'm seeing and that I'd love to talk with you all about is to the point of being able to come up with a battle plan, as Suzanne noted. We always think about our annual development plan, and it takes us over our fiscal year, and there's of course a timeline, there's a number of activities and opportunities. What I'm seeing that I began to see in 2020 and that I'm already working with my clients on in 2021 is more frequent assessment points of our annual development plan. So instead of just looking at the revenue, we're going to look at strategies. So right now, everything I do is done by quarter. And the first quarter of at least the calendar year is coming up here in about a month. That's a great assessment point to say, how have we done activity-wise? How have we done revenue-wise? And what are we hearing from our donors and grant funders in terms of how we're delivering the types of communication, cultivation, and content that they really want to see? Also, we really need to focus on donor retention, and that is best done through truly excellent stewardship. What we saw through the last Great Recession is that nonprofits that lost donors during that period never got them back. I already noted earlier that it's an increasingly competitive nonprofit fundraising environment because there are so many causes that are in dire need of funds at this point. So first and foremost, retain your donors and do that through excellent stewardship that's done through timely gift processing and recognition, and then all the personal outreach that you can possibly do. Also, I want to have all nonprofits re-examine your donor types and your activities that you conduct to prioritize potential. We know that not all fundraising activities are created equal. And I think the best example of that is pointing to an event that cost you $40,000 to put on and raised you $50,000. The ROI of that may not look great to you all. This is the perfect year, if you have not already done it, to take a look at all of your key fundraising activities to really take a look at how is it the smartest and the best way for us to raise revenue. And then I want to encourage you to really build the personalized strategies based on your donor pyramid, which is what I work so extensively with my clients on. And that's based on existing giving, but also potential giving across donor types, individuals, companies, foundations, etc. Annual level fund, giving you lower level gifts. Mid-level, meaning donors that are demonstrating it, kind of a nice gift, not one you would immediately pick up the phone, but something that feels like a step above what you might see through mail or through an online donation. And then of course your major donors and other special circumstances, the donors and the funders that can really help you leap ahead in terms of fundraising revenue, connections, and that's of course for annual operations, programmatic funding, and then any campaign or above and beyond type efforts. So a couple of predictions for you all. Revisit that prospect and funder research because there have been a lot of shifts made on gift giving and grant making. So it may be that for a funder that you weren't a fit for earlier, if you're doing COVID related type work, you may now have an opportunity there. As Suzanne said, and is something I'll point to in a moment, also looking for capacity building funding, matches, and other kind of more creative opportunities that you can start talking with donors and grant makers about. Also, I really encourage you to develop targeted plans for first-time donors and returning lapsed donors. Kind of along the same vein of this is an increasingly competitive fundraising environment. For instance, if you had a brand new donor come to you in 2020, I think that really means quite a bit, right? They had a lot of opportunities but they saw something in your organization, in the programs that you're running, and in the strength of your leadership that made them give a first gift in a really challenging year. That is worth extra time and attention, as well as any lapsed donors that came back in 2020 and really through now, right? We want to steward those people properly, and we want to really engage them in our new work and in our looking forward work. Also, I heard this quite a bit in the survey findings, which is, how do we continue to be in this virtual environment as it pertains to fundraising? So what I'll say is, yes, we need to make the game plan for continued virtual prospect and donor engagement. And the best way to do that is to have a strategy brainstorm session that you can do with your staff, with your board members, and think about it around the 4 activities of fundraising: identification, cultivation, solicitation, stewardship. If we can each brainstorm the various components of how we do those sections virtually, I think that will be very beneficial to you as you continue to adapt your development plan based on our current needs. So a couple of key actions for all of you. For the nonprofits on the call, I encourage you, think about those 4 pillars of fundraising and think of the one excellent thing that you can do for each for 2021. So as it relates to our development infrastructure, ensure your infrastructure, meaning your donation functions online, prospect tracking, reporting, are functional and intuitive. I would absolutely agree with what Suzanne said. It's that technology edge that will have you prepared and ready to fundraise in a more effective way. Think about your case for support, who you are as an organization, the work that you're doing, and you may need to take a look at that and generate a refreshed, timely case for support that really justifies the need for increased giving, right? And not just the standard part of the course giving, but we want to talk to people about what's happening right now, what that means for us in 2021 and in the years ahead, and why it's so critical that we get their support. Now look at your leadership and really encourage your leadership, your board of director, your development committee, and others to take a more active role in your organizational visioning. So as fundraisers, we always say, give me something great to fundraise for. That's where that organizational visioning piece comes in. But also, they can very actively participate in donor stewardship, personal emails, thank you calls to donors, and prospect introductions. Especially in this continued virtual world, we're not able to go out there and do all of our normal networking activities that we as fundraisers typically do. So that's where the connections and the introductions are increasingly important. And for the donors, engage your key donors and your stakeholders in those ambitious plans, including starting or revisiting a campaign effort. I'm already working with multiple clients right now and hearing from past clients that they've been preparing to start to think about a campaign effort, whether the fundraising for that needs to begin within 12 months or within 36 months. 2021 is a good year to start thinking about how to test that additional campaign effort. And for the funders on this call or that will watch this recording afterwards, I encourage all of you to really integrate that trust-based philanthropy into your grant strategy that we've certainly been seeing over the years. Lower barrier of entry for new nonprofits, less cumbersome reporting requirements, but really forming a partnership with these nonprofit grantees to allow them to use the money where the need is the greatest. I would also encourage funders to consider additional grants to your annual recipients for things like donor challenges and matches, capital improvements, and other near-term programmatic enhancements that are going to be imperative to nonprofits as we progress beyond COVID and really get back into our buildings and into our more embedded programs that we've been used to doing. I would encourage funders to also support capacity building funding. I can't tell you, and I'm sure all the consultants on the call can echo this. We have conversations with nonprofits and they say, gosh, I really need your help. Now, can you help me think of grant funders who can pay for you? And I've really seen the impact that even short-term consulting help can provide to nonprofits really of all sizes. So thinking about providing capacity building funding to pay for things like consultant expertise, technology updates, and other kind of critical nonprofit gaps that their annual operating budgets just can't support. And then, of course, encouraging and guiding donor-advised fund holders to unlock additional funds, maybe general operating, maybe programmatic purposes. But I think that's one of the best things that funders and community foundations can do to encourage philanthropy in 2021 and beyond. So now I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Susan. So my word, the theme for 2021 is accuracy. The accuracy of your financial statements is the foundation for your decision making, or the accuracy of your budget, or making sure that your audit is done correctly. It's just so important and critical, and it's really a focus area of mine with every client I work with, is to get accuracy to be number one. I'm very willing to live with some delayed timing if the end result is going to be very accurate for all the users, executive director, other staff, board, funders, things like that. Susan, next slide. So the financial priorities that you identified, the top one was operating reserves. And operating reserves are really the outcome of changes you would make from Suzanne's talk, from Susan's development work. You're going to hear from Kim about a digital strategy. Operating reserves are created when you have an increase in income, you have a decrease in expenses, maybe you get an unexpected large gift. It's not something you can just order online and say, I want another 20% of operating reserves. You really have to earn it. I think the other part, cash flow continues to be a top issue. And then people identifying, accurate reporting. The other piece that is important is that one of your priorities, you're looking for funding to expand. I think that's a really positive sign. On the responses to 2020 pressures, the biggest answer, most people, 20%, receive COVID funding. Very necessary. Unfortunately, due to the revenue challenges, there were a lot of reduced staff, so reorganizations. That was 17%. Another 13% reduced their overhead, and 10% had to postpone some programs. They couldn't make them happen, physically or in another way. Next slide. So the key trends that I see, one is the profitability review of each program, event, revenue department, and it really becomes a standard part of the month-end financial reporting package. It lets you know, what's making money, what's not making money, how does, program A compare to program B. It really lets you look at the individual results of all sorts of different activities and make some decisions as they relate to your mission. The other trend is focusing on less. Less is more with many nonprofits. It's a challenge to do everything that you did pre-COVID. It's better to focus on less activities and do them extremely well. That's a trend that we're seeing. And then I use the word pivoting. So obviously I wouldn't say pivot, maybe it's reset business models, because business models have changed and to both scale impact and create financial sustainability. So really it isn't pivoting, it's resetting in some cases and in some major ways. So the predictions I see is that organizations are moving towards accurate and realistic next 6 months budgets. The next 6 months is the most critical time frame for your organization right now. I know people want to think long term and think about 2022, 2023. You have to figure out how are you going to be successful in the next 6 months. So there's a focus on really making sure that next 6-month budget is very accurate and predictable of what could happen. The other prediction is, organizations need experienced financial expertise. And it could be, we recommend that there either be a staff person that has that accounting knowledge. It could be someone like me, an as-needed CFO. It could be someone on your board. It is very difficult to navigate in 2021 without having a financial partner with you as part of your work. And then the third prediction is a lot of organizations are using dashboards. There are still some that are giving boards, detailed QuickBooks reports and things like that. The dashboard is really the tool to frame the conversation you're having about your business, communicate financial performance, communicate how you're doing with key metrics. So you're going to see almost every organization implementing dashboards in a much more significant way. Next slide. So for nonprofits, the actions is that if you don't have for CEOs and directors, if you don't have the financial expertise that you feel comfortable with, is consider some coaching. It could be from your CPA firm, your audit firm, could be from someone like me. Maybe it's someone that's on your board of directors, but make a plan to improve your financial acumen. The second item is take the time to conduct a financial and accounting assessment to evaluate your staff, technologies, and processes. You want to map out a plan to strengthen your financial statement preparation and reporting. We do these on a regular basis. In fact, every client that we start, we're doing an assessment to really pinpoint where they are now and help them map out where they'll be going. And then focusing on improving systems efficiency. I think both Susan and Suzanne talked about technology being just such a key part of the business. You should be looking at other processes, especially with multiple systems. One of our clients has Salesforce, and they have another tool, and then they have QuickBooks, and it's not all linked together. So there's system inefficiency that's taking up some of the financial staff's time to get the data into QuickBooks, as an example. So look for areas of the business to streamline operations, and that will help you reduce operating expenses. For funders, and there are a bunch of foundations from time to time that do this, is offer financial coaching or other classes to help nonprofit CEOs and executive teams really understand their financials and be able to better predict future scenarios. And then, support shared service arrangements for smaller nonprofits. It's a challenge for a very small nonprofit to just have a bookkeeper 1 day a week or a half a day a week. If there were shared service arrangements, that there could be a group of staff that could serve many nonprofits and really improve their understanding. So now I will turn it over to Kim Bulger.
Good morning, everyone. So as you might not be surprised, nonprofits are really investing in digital engagement and broadening their visibility. So my theme is investing in digital and data technology. Nonprofits have been expanding digital engagement since the pandemic began. The level of sophistication, though, that is required now to excel in it will likely mean that most nonprofits need some kind of investments this year, at least in tools. So start thinking about what are those priority investments so that you can get the most mileage from those dollars. Your website becomes a hub for engagement, connection, revenue generation. You've got to serve all your audiences through that hub. So your funders, your donors, your clients, and your communities. Next slide. So it's not a surprise that 94% are focused on digital engagement. Where we're focused, social media engagement, online storytelling, driving that online visibility and traffic to our website and to our digital assets. Digital fundraising has always been important for many years, but it's now more important as we have less face time with our donors and our funders. 11% are focused on building more robust online communities. We're seeing a lot with associations realizing to provide value that might replace in-person networking, having rich online communities where people can have subgroups and can have conversations, can ask advice, can network, can kind of simulate some of the value that they were getting previously from events. And then there's a whole host of other things we're focused on, including new CRM, digital tools, ways to track metrics. So technology and digital will be key this year. And as we've heard from the previous speakers, it really will become a competitive advantage. So the nonprofits that invest wisely in digital and data technology are going to have the most success, and it's going to be dramatic from the ones that don't. So, I realize everyone's lean, but I recommend really prioritizing where you're going to get the ROI and which things matter to do first, and to really focus on, for this quarter, this is the top 1 to 3 things we're going to do next from an investment perspective, as well as from an engagement outreach perspective. Next slide. This is probably not a surprise, but it's more dramatic now than it was a year ago. Management teams and boards need to get more comfortable with technology. You probably need to expand the ranks of who's on your board. You want to have people from the technology community. You want to have people that are experts in digital marketing and digital fundraising. You want to be bringing in people that can expand your horizon of how we become a digital first organization. And that means how we deliver our program delivery, how we engage with our audience. So many of us scrambled last year to implement digital and virtual solutions, but we did it on a dime without the time to kind of really plan how to do it optimally. Nonprofits need to take time now, and we're seeing this with the clients we work with. It's a good time to be thoughtful about how we prioritize which digital and technology investments make sense to do right now, which are going to best deliver the value to, whether we're a membership organization to deliver more value to our members, whether we're a food bank and how we connect with our communities and the people that we help, and then how do we engage with those people that support us and fund us. There's an increasing need to personalize digital engagement. So what we've seen is having a mass approach where we try to go broad and reach out to a lot of people with a similar message is not working anymore. You really have to tailor down to who are the subgroups of supporters that matter most to this organization this year and the following year. It is better to be more relevant and connect deeper with a smaller number of targeted supporters than to go too broad. And we recommend kind of looking at it from the perspective of where is the high mission alignment, so the shared value with what your nonprofit wants to achieve, and then where's the ROI potential. So the ROI potential could be who's going to drive the most revenue for the organization, or it could be strategic. We really need to engage this type of volunteer, these type of board members, community partners to help us build our capacity and achieve more in our community. So it really needs to be a strategic lens because the focus has to be there. And then investing in a mobile first website is a priority this year, especially. In a minute, I'll talk about some of the key things you need to have a mobile first website. But what that means is we design the website for mobile for the person getting on their phone, and then we implement that for the desktop. And Google will start looking at our websites strictly by what they look like on our phone. And so if we have missing links, if we have a clumsy experience, if we have content that's down below the fold, Google won't see any of that. So we need to start having a website that's really focused on designing for mobile. And then of course, storytelling has always been important, but it's even more so. As Susan talked about the competitiveness of so many organizations that we can help, why it doesn't matter to help your organization. What's the impact you're going to make? And people want to see it visually. So they want to watch a video. They want to see an infographic. They want to see those metrics of outcomes in very skimmable, easy ways on social media and online. And by doing all this, you will be able to drive more donations online, more interest, more quality connections. A recent Salesforce study found that nonprofits with a high digital maturity are gaining a competitive advantage. Last year, the nonprofits rated as high digital mature, it exceeded their fundraising goals, landed more grants, and they are expanding their online results. While the contrast is true, those low on the digital spectrum are really underperforming in this area. So it's certainly something where the people that invest wisely, they're going to see a big payoff. Next slide. So as I previewed, Google has a major algorithm update coming in May of 2021. So they will now start looking at your website strictly on what I can see on your mobile site. Page experience matters. So they will be looking at, do you create a great experience for the people that land on your page? So some really simple things to think about is, you know, when I pull up your page, do I see the most important content on every key page before I have to scroll? Some of your important links, donate links, links to more information. On mobile, they need to be spaced out. If you have fat fingers like me, they can't be right next to each other in teeny, or I'm going to click on the wrong link. And Google collects that information and says, that's a bad, frustrating experience for the user. You also have to care about a fast loading website now. That top content on every page and the images have to load in 2.5 seconds. That there are ways that you can prioritize the content on the page where it loads the most important things and the content at the top first, but also optimizing using smaller images and being, you know, really careful about this. That's going to provide a better user experience, and that's what Google is going to reward you with. They want to see content that gives audiences the answers they want quickly. So if someone found you in a search and they go to that page, that person is actively engaged. They want to stay on that page, and then they want to look around your site. Google evaluates that by people who stay 60 seconds or longer. If you bounce faster than that, they think that's a bad experience. That must not be good content that I should show to future search visitors. The current assessment is only 15% of websites currently meet these new Google standards. So even if you're not an organization that's put a lot of emphasis on search engine optimization, you will start seeing less results. So if you don't make any of these changes, your website will not show up on the top page on Google. It'll be very hard for people to find you. It'll be very easy for them to find the nonprofits who are focused here. So this is a core area to really think about. And I suggest starting with an audit. So, you know, have your team and have your board look at your website, look at it on mobile, see what the experience feels like. In some, if Google feels like it's a happy experience for the user, then you're going to get search results and you're going to get more traffic to your site. Next slide. So for predictions, it's probably not hard to imagine that the digital divide is becoming greater. Digital and data investments are going to drive that competitive advantage. And the ROI can be significant, especially on the revenue generation side. Now that the audience expects more personalized engagement, it might necessitate a better CRM system, like a Salesforce type system. You may need better data collection tools. To have a sophisticated engagement, people want to know that you already understand them. So that you might need to do listening sessions. You might need to spend some social media time just scanning what people are talking about. So, you know, quality over quantity is going to be important. We want to have mobile first websites, better storytelling, very thoughtful online engagement. The ones that do that well are going to see a higher engagement, more traffic, and it's likely to lead to more online donations or a better impression with our funders. We want to focus on relevant content, meaningful conversations that will advance our work more than worrying about touching everyone and having frequency. So that digital engagement wins is going to require a narrower focus, but a deeper connection. Next slide. So in terms of key actions, I urge you to start with the audit. So the audit looks at your messaging. Are we delivering value that's relevant to our stakeholders right now? Are we expressing some urgency? So especially if we're trying to convince individual donors or corporate donors, if we're trying to convince people to join as a member in our membership organization now, they need to feel more urgency of why does it matter now? What impact will we make? What value will the organization provide? We want to prioritize those visuals that quickly tell our story, that show our value, that make a connection. And then we want to audit our website, our social media connections, our social media outreach, and look what we're doing well, look where the gaps are, and let's prioritize what we should be doing better. We want to be thinking about more nimbleness. So instead of a 12-month plan, let's have a quarterly plan where we really think about, for the next quarter, these are our top 3 priorities in terms of what we're going to achieve with digital engagement, what we might refine on our website. And then let's use metrics that we review continuously so we know what's working. So which articles got the most interest? Which conversations got 20 people to comment on us on that post on LinkedIn? What about that conversation was meaningful to the audience? How can we replicate that? How can we keep doing more of what's working and keep refining our plan? And then on the funder side, certainly nonprofits now need to invest more than ever in digital and data technology investments. So providing that ability to help build their capacity, make them more sustainable is going to be key. Certainly offering webinars and coaching to help nonprofit management teams and boards better understand technology, better understand online engagement and social media, and helping nonprofits connect with the board members that bring that technology expertise, the data expertise, the digital marketing expertise that'll help them really take their nonprofit to reach their goals and achieve more. And now I want to open it up to our Q&A. So if you haven't already, please chat what your question is for the speakers. We're going to prioritize the questions that have the most relevance for everyone first, and then if we have time, we'll go into more specific questions. If we don't have enough time for your question, feel free to email the panelists directly, and we'll reply via email. I'll pause 1 second while people are typing in their questions, and I'd like to go back to each speaker and ask for what's one final piece of advice you would give to our attendees today. Suzanne?
Before we do that, we did get a question in the chat about the resources after the fact, so I think that might be of relevance to folks. So we will very shortly after this call have the recording, the slides, as well as our contact information if you need anything additional, as well as the lovely infographic that goes into all of the data behind this. I know many of you guys were interested, as we were, in the survey results. One of the questions I got, which I think probably is my key theme as far as next steps, is this idea of a battle plan. So Allie asked, how would you approach that? So part of what I have done with existing clients is essentially do what I call a refresh to their existing strategic plan. So if you have a strategic plan and it maybe is overdue to actually create a new strategic plan, what we would recommend is for you to actually do what was called a refresh. And so that refresh is an opportunity for you to take a look at that strategic plan and extend it over the time period of 2021. And maybe even a partial part of 2022, depending on if you're in calendar year or fiscal year. And so really it's an opportunity for you to go objective by objective and see, have you completed it? Has that thing become obsolete? Is there some carry forward that you need to have? It's also an opportunity for you to say, is there something new, either on this presentation or in 2020, that you need to add to your strategic plan? So what that allows you to do is extend the strategic plan. We call that a bridge plan. So you're bridging into your next strategic plan. And if you don't have a strategic plan, or your strategic plan is relatively old and it's something that needs to be redone, what we're recommending, rather than nonprofits go through a strategic planning process in 2021, again, because I mentioned that the line of sight for 2021 is not quite where it needs to be in order to do really strong strategy, is you can do a quick action plan. And so that's a quick retreat where you kind of think through maybe a SWOT analysis, or you go through a program assessment. You get at least a little bit of rapid feedback from your clients and from funders, and you do a lot of these upgrades that we're talking about, so that you come out of 2021 a stronger organization. And then you set yourself up for a future strategic plan so that you really can play on that chessboard. But I'm a big believer that in 2021, nonprofits in general, whether they're growing exponentially because they're a food bank and they're serving lots of different people, or they're an arts organization and they're struggling because they can't see their patrons, they need to really think through 2021 and make sure they don't get stuck, and they're really leveraging the opportunity to push forward and have some key actions that they want to accomplish in 2021. So I would say my big key theme is make sure you have a plan for 2021, Kim.
Great. Susan, do you have a final point you'd like to share?
Sure. I think when we think about the fundraising world, it can often be very cumbersome because there are so many different types of donors. And for some of us, organizations that have been around for quite a while, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of donors. So you think, how do I appropriately message and cultivate and solicit from such a vast group? Mm-hmm. So this is really the year that you need to think about donor strategies based on that pyramid that I shared. And the higher you get on the pyramid, the more personalized your strategies become. So I would encourage all the nonprofits on the call to think about who are your donor types, individual, foundation, corporate, as an example, and then who is at the annual level, the mid-level, and the major level. And really personalize those strategies, get your leadership and your staff leaders and board leaders engaged the higher you get up on the pyramid. And I do think that that will lead to a significant jump in your donor retention and the ability to increase those gifts across donor types.
And John?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Susan. I'm going to go back to my keyword, accuracy. In my CFO world, quality trumps the time to create financial statements or budgets. There are so many people that depend on the accuracy of your financial statements. Internal staff, grant funders, your board, your audit firm. And I'll just tell you from my own experience is there's a rush to produce sometimes financial statements without having the required accuracy. Take the extra time to make sure the numbers are right. If you don't know what certain numbers mean, ask your accountant, ask your CPA firm, ask a board member, but please take the time to get it right. It's really going to pay huge dividends for you in everything you do. Kim?
And I'll just share, use a digital lens across your organization. Have a very nimble approach. Make sure we prioritize having dedicated staff to focus on our communications efforts and our digital engagement. I see some nonprofits who under-resource in that area. This can't be outsourced completely to volunteers and board members. They can enhance what we do, but we need people on the inside that's their core focus, is how we're going to move forward with what we want to achieve with digital engagement. And then prioritize where it matters, and then use the metrics to refine often. I want to move into a question that we have for Susan. How far in advance should we be planning for a campaign, and what are the things we should be thinking about?
Great, thank you. I always love when people ask about campaigns because I feel like that is at the heart of what we do in the nonprofit sector. Is we're thinking about realizing our vision. We're aspirational, we're optimistic, which is really what our sector is about, is improving this world. And so what I would say to answer that question is, if you know that you want to begin a campaign in 2 years, 2021 is probably the year to develop the format for that campaign and to test the feasibility of that campaign with your major donors and stakeholders. Another note I'll make about campaigns is that a lot of people think that a campaign is just about building a building or renovating a building. And in fact, campaigns are very diverse and often include multiple components. Maybe you have a capital component. There's often also a programmatic investment or enhancement in some kind. Maybe there's support for your annual operations over a period of years. Maybe it's the building of an endowment. So there's a lot of different ways to structure a campaign. And so I would encourage you to think kind of across the spectrum of your organization and what are all the needs? And is there a way to package a project that is above and beyond what we do on an annual basis so that we can share and sell that future state vision? That's what a campaign is really about. It's not about the vision. It's about saying, this is who we're going to be and become with your investment. So what I would say is think back a couple of years and go ahead and develop the project. Work with a consultant to test the feasibility among those key stakeholders. And I think what you'll find is that if you are an organization that has a strong donor base, you've got excellent leadership, the community and your donors support you, they will go along with probably most campaigns that you conceptualize. But I do think that don't skip that step of feasibility. It's a really important tool to get a view from the outside of how people would see our potential campaign.
Great. And then there was a follow-up question on a similar theme. This could be for Susan or John to answer. What do you recommend for a new nonprofit startup for capital funding?
I'll jump in and then John, feel free to tag on. It's really hard. You know, I mean, if you don't have an existing donor base that includes major donors, I'm never worried about a campaign garnering $25 gifts and $50 gifts just through, you know, the efforts of mass promotion. But I would say if you're a newer nonprofit, you want to do a campaign, I wouldn't do much until you've got some key investors lined up. So I would aim for maybe a donor or funder that could give you 20% of your campaign goal. Let's start there as just a first step, and then as hopefully an opportunity to build from there.
John, do you have any thoughts on the funding side?
Yeah, I think for the startup nonprofit, in some way, you need to start doing some of the work. I'm not going to say you have to prove your complete model, but I think it's if you're a startup, well, you're going to have to bootstrap yourself for a while, just like anyone in the for-profit world, and you need to prove something to, I think, to some potential donors. I think you can sell the vision of what you're trying to accomplish and the community you're going to serve. But I think part of it is you need to start, you know, doing some of the work. Who knows? It might be volunteering somewhere. It might be doing something else. I think it's. I'll agree with Susan. I think it's difficult to get a large or significant amount of capital before you've really, you know, launched or if you're just thinking to launch. So that's just my opinion. It could be different for some organizations, but.
And I'll just add, I've seen some organizations, I think that Susan's suggestion of looking for that 20% donor is certainly key, but also surrounding yourself with the board members, the advisors who can help you think strategically about how to get those big wins. That's going to be really important. You need kind of those brand ambassadors who are such advocates for the mission that they will reach into their personal networks. They will really help you get to that, you know, initial framework of how do we get the, some of the bigger donors first, so we show kind of this legitimacy and provenness that we need to get the expanded donations to come in. Suzanne, do you have something else?
As kind of the social entrepreneur, I think we have a lot of new startups out in the marketplace. And I think that from my perspective, they need to be looking at this in an entrepreneurial fashion, where if you're a startup, you have identified a void that exists in your community. And so from my perspective, it has to have a foundation of a strong needs assessment. Something that is a void, something that really is something that is going to achieve exponential value for the community. So as a result, if you really do have that needs assessment, I think that's an opportunity for you to go to funders and go to government and go to people and say, this is why we should exist. In fact, I was just meeting with someone yesterday who's doing a really interesting children's museum, a take on a children's museum, and they're relatively new in the marketplace, but they've spent quite a bit of time doing due diligence, looking at the return on investment, talking about not just their own outcomes, but the outcome that if they existed in the community. And the outcome of if we create more creative youth, this is what ends up happening as a result. So I would say to focus on that case statement and really go and talk to people about that case statement, because then that's going to help you then develop evangelists out there who will then help you make the case in their networks. And then that network will then be the opportunity for you to build a capital campaign committee. And then that capital campaign committee can then move forward with this idea that you created. So I think I look at this as kind of an opportunity for you to really shore up your pitch, really make a really strong case around the void, and talk not only about your own outcomes, but how is the community going to be changed if you actually create the thing that you're thinking about.
That's great advice. We got a question for John that tell us more about dashboards. So if you could tell us a little bit about what would be a next step that nonprofits should consider, and what should the dashboard be able to achieve once they've implemented it?
Is this the, hold on, is this the shared services question?
No, dashboards.
Oh, dashboards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for everyone, I posted the resource book that I use called the Nonprofit Dashboard, a tool for tracking progress. Basically, the dashboard, think of it as a very, I call it a mini income statement and balance sheet. So it could have earned income, contributed income, which is total income, could have compensation, other expenses, total expenses, and change in net assets. 5 or 6 lines so people can understand, what's happening from your operating statement. You would have cash and maybe a few other items from your balance sheet. Once again, it's basically giving people almost like a postcard picture of where your organization is at. And dashboards also at times have some notes. So you're keying people into what does that really mean? We're ahead of budget, we're below budget. So it'd be actual versus budget, could be actual versus last year, or both of those. And basically you're framing the financial picture for your audience. Then you can go into a QuickBooks report, a donor pipeline or development pipeline, or other programmatic successes. But it lets you start and get everyone on the same page. I've just seen people dive into the detail too much, and you lose the conversation. It's very hard to go back and refocus the group.
Suzanne, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think John is talking about a financial dashboard, but I think we're using in the nonprofit space dashboard in a much broader sense. And when I was talking about a battle plan and strategic plan, I'm a big believer that strategic plans need to be one page. In this world where people are wanting and consuming information really quickly, to Kim's point and Susan's point, we really have to communicate that very quickly. And so a one-page strategic plan is something that allows external audiences to see the direction that you're going. It also allows internal audiences to see your big rocks. What are the things that you're going to move over a given time period? But it doesn't tell the whole story. A good strategic plan should build clarity and momentum. But then the dashboard can be that next step that you take with the strategic plan to turn that plan into action. So when we talk about dashboards, we look at them in 2 different ways. And because automobile dashboards have evolved, our version of dashboards have evolved. So now no longer do you just have dials in front of you when you're driving that kind of tell you where you are with things, but it also tells you how far you've actually gone. So you've got GPS as well. So our dashboard actually includes every single objective, breaking it down into the individual activity, the owner involved, whether or not that thing is completed, and then the metric of what does it mean when we achieve this? Because one of the most important parts of planning is actually figuring out when you've actually achieved an objective. What is the metric that you place on achievement? And it could be a financial metric, it could be a culture metric, it could be a number of different things. So from my perspective, a dashboard is a really great tool. And so anytime you're putting together an action plan, a strategic plan, or a battle plan, you can then go that one layer deeper and put together a dashboard that is just an easy to see way of tracking progress and tracking your metrics. And that should be something on a regular basis that your board should be looking at to see where are we on the plan. And you can even calibrate it based on a red light, green light, yellow light strategy, which is everything that's green is going really well in the plan. Everything that's yellow may have some problems and maybe bottlenecks. And then you can pay attention to the areas where, as a board or a governance, I think we've lost the Q&A at this point from the past one. And so Kim, have we resolved the technology glitch?
I don't know what happened, but it's letting everyone back in. And I do have all the questions that were asked already recorded in a separate document, so we can keep going. So
I think I was finishing my point about dashboards. So why don't we move on to the next question?
There was one follow-up question on dashboards. Is there a free online source to experiment with data presentation? Is that anything anyone has an answer to, or we could answer that over email?
You know, the tool that I've been using a lot with my students is Canva.
Okay.
You know, we use, you know, traditional PowerPoint and try to put together the PowerPoint slides like you saw today. But if you're new to PowerPoint or don't have that back engine work, I think Canva is a really great tool. And it has lots of great templates that you can utilize, and it pretty much makes PowerPoint presentations very easy. So I would encourage you to take a look at Canva. Susan, do you use anything in your practice?
People love Canva. And I would just echo that as a tool that I do feel like a lot of people are using Canva. None others come to mind. So I'll just kind of leave it with that. But I agree. I hear Canva's great.
Can you put that in chat?
Yes.
The name? Yep,
we will.
And Suzanne, just to comment on your, you know, what we see is organizations using multiple dashboards. You know, obviously I'm deeply involved in the numbers part of the world. So the numbers dashboard is one piece, but I see organizations using multiple dashboards, and especially ones that you talked about. Sorry about that, Kim.
No worries. And I'll just add, you know, as Suzanne echoed that you need metrics in every key area, the same goes with your digital side. So I suggest a monthly report. You probably should look at it weekly and daily, but management team should see it monthly, and it should boil down to one page. So you should pick out what is the key metrics that are indicators that we're on track with our strategy. And again, you want to make it simple for decision makers to see the right level of data and not get into the weeds. And then the person who's working day to day on the digital engagement should be looking at that fine tuning of metrics. So what specific posts got more, you know, what can we analyze about that? How can we replicate it? And then there's, you know, the actual plan. I've seen a lot of people put their editorial calendars into a spreadsheet where you can see at a glance everything we're doing horizontally. And it's very effective to be able to have that visual of, you know, this is a theme and this is all the different channels that we're promoting it on. And you can see at a glance that this is logical and makes sense and it's on strategy. And then you can also see where you need to fine tune. One other question I'd like to turn to Suzanne. I think one thing that we found when we've been talking with nonprofits is many have a message they want to tell funders. What would you tell funders that we haven't already addressed on this call is how can they most help nonprofits this year and the next year after?
You know, I think one of the things, and I think Susan probably would share this as well, is we have the wealth to actually solve most of the problems. And I see Lynn and a number of the folks that are my friends in the Catholic Church. And I've told the Catholic Church multiple times, like, we have the resources to solve for poverty. It's just a matter of marshaling the resources. We have the wealth, we have the ideas, we have the strategies, we have the outcomes. And so I think part of what I would encourage funders to really think about is unlocking that wealth. It concerns me right now that we have such income inequality, yet in many foundations, we have barely 5% going out. We have a number of donor advised funds, although it's picking up. I just saw some new metrics that more and more DAFs are actually pushing their money out into the community. But I would tell funders that we're in a place where, again, if the Great Reset is going to happen, it's not going to just happen because nonprofits want it. It's because funders are saying, this is the time to invest. This is the time to change the game board. This is a time and an opportunity for us to really talk to nonprofits, but also talk to the community in a difficult way around issues like equity and income inequality and immigration and poverty and the arts. And so I would just encourage funders on this call to recognize the call for what it is, and instead of giving drips of money, they need to be putting buckets of money towards a lot of these capacity building areas that we're talking about. And I promise that the nonprofit sector will spring forward and leapfrog, and we're going to see the return on that in a short amount of years.
And I'll add on to that to say that a theory I've been talking about for a few years now is the idea of the activist philanthropist. And I think that goes certainly along with what Suzanne has just mentioned. And I think that we should encourage our major donors, our funders, our DAF holders to think of themselves as activists. And one way that they can be an activist is to give large gifts to the philanthropies of their choosing that they feel like are really addressing the issues they see in society that they want to fix. And on the nonprofit side, I would encourage nonprofit leaders to think about, how do we engage donors around more than just their gift? How do we give them a seat at the table? How do we ask for their opinion and incorporate those opinions and thoughts into our community of nonprofit leaders and how we're all collectively trying to solve these problems?
That's great. Susan and John, one thing that came up earlier when we were looking at the survey data was a lot of nonprofits say, I would like to build larger operating reserves. Certainly if you had large operating reserves last year, it was a nice safety net. What are both of your thoughts on what's the best way to achieve this goal?
Dan, you want to go first? You want me to go?
John, take it away.
Yeah. So for operating reserves, and we just went through this with one of our clients, they said, well, how can we increase operating reserves? And part of it is we have to increase money from operations that's going to go to operating cash that eventually can be transferred to operating reserves or investments. You have to earn it, or you have to have a sizable unplanned donation arrive that you can put into your operating reserve. I'm the board chair of the Stockbridge Library. There are times when we get a bequest, and the majority of the bequest we tend to put in reserves and not use it to fund operating. I think you have to have a discipline about monies that may come in, and always save for a rainy day and put some of that money aside. Rather, the challenge is, do you use it to expand operations, or do you put some money aside for operating reserves? One of our clients, customers were talking about, for their PPP2 loan, which we're applying for, that probably 25% of that money, besides the intended use, money that would be saved would go towards an operating reserve. So that's an example. I mean, Suzanne, any ideas, or Susan?
Susan, let's go to Susan next.
So thank you for that intro. That's, I think, really helpful for the nonprofits. I always hear things like, gosh, if I just knew someone at the Gates Foundation, or if we just got a couple bequests in, that would really do a lot for us. And that's always wonderful when it happens, and there's strategies that you can build to put yourself in a better position to be able to get those types of windfall type grants and gifts. But plan on that not happening, is what I tell everyone. Plan on doing it the hard way, which is an annual development plan with increasingly personalized strategies. You can set your budget. And then for fundraising, we always have a stretch budget. If you meet stretch budget, there's an opportunity there to put some of that revenue into reserve. The other thing that I'll tag on is the idea that if you are going to do some sort of above and beyond effort, I'll call it a campaign, because some people will think of it as a campaign. You'll think of it as a special project. Incorporate a piece into there about building an operating reserve. I think if your organization is one that is highly thought of, supported by your donors, strong leadership, people feel like that you will be good stewards of their dollars, they will be more likely to give you an unrestricted campaign gift and then be able to silo it as you see fit. And I certainly see that operating reserves and endowments, if that's part of the case, do test well with donor audiences if they have strong belief in the organization and the leadership. So sometimes if you do have a campaign effort, that's a great opportunity to add in an operating reserve component or an endowment component.
That's great advice.
That's great.
Susan, could you recommend, you mentioned in your presentation earlier how you want to involve donors, engaging them in the strategy and the planning. Can you give a couple pointers of how nonprofits might start with doing this, as more of their strategy and planning component?
Sure. Here's just a couple of examples. The first is I work with a lot of nonprofits that we've learned great things from doing fundraising assessments and feasibility studies, because oftentimes a component of that is some form of stakeholder engagement or feedback. And of course, with feasibility studies, we think of one-to-one donor interviews with major donors and funders. But increasingly over the years, I've been incorporating a lot of really easy to use online surveys through like a SurveyMonkey platform, where it's just a check-in opportunity with donors. And I think over the years, I've seen those get increasing rates of participation when we just ask 5 to 10 questions, like how would you rate our messaging? What are areas you would like to hear about more? How would you rate our stewardship of you as a donor? What are additional pieces of information that you would like to see? And do you want it to be an e-newsletter or one-to-one email or a virtual webinar? Have an annual check-in point that you do with all of your donors and community members, people that follow you online, to say, how can we do better? That's a really basic way that I think tests very well, really easy to answer, 5 to 10 questions sent out once a year. I see first quarter of the calendar year doing really well with that after the year on giving is concluded, maybe in February or March. And then from a higher level perspective, a lot of people are doing kind of virtual town halls, small groups. I have a lot of clients doing that right now. We've got one for major donors and funders that we're doing. We have one for mid-level donors and first-time donors. You do specific invitations to them. You give kind of, this is how we ended up, this is where we're looking forward, and then you engage in a Q&A much as we're doing here. And it's a way for them to ask and hear timely, relevant information about your programs, what you're planning on doing, and where they can provide you with feedback and give you information. So there's 2 ways that I would encourage nonprofits to do that I don't think take a lot of time or resources to put together.
That's great advice. And I will also say, in terms of when you're wearing the digital and outreach hat, always talk to some of the donors. Ask them, do you have 20 minutes? You can join me on a call. Hear what about the organization was the passion point that drew them to the organization, what they would tell a peer of why to donate in the organization. You're going to get some nuggets in terms of what are the words that they lock into, and those are messages that are more likely to resonate with other donors. And so having that conversation and listening and hearing, even asking if they would want to look at some of your first passes of messages and get some feedback on how it can be better. Suzanne, I think you had a question you wanted to introduce.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I just watched The Social Dilemma, which if you guys haven't watched, it's really great on Netflix. And it really does talk about the changing dynamics that are happening. And so more and more people are not using their computer, they're using their phone. When they're Googling, they're asking questions or they're asking Siri. So I'm interested, Kim, I know you follow all these digital trends. I'd love for you to give your advice to nonprofits about how they make sure that they're at the top of the search for Google. So when their clients are saying, hey, I need something, or when another nonprofit is saying, let me find a nonprofit that does X, how do they get at the top of the search, and what are some things they need to do to change their nonprofit websites?
That's a really good question. As I mentioned, it's really something strategic to work on the first half of this year, since you'll start seeing some impact after May. So Google has always prioritized a good mobile experience, but the difference now is they literally, the way your website looks on a desktop will be invisible to Google. They will only look at it how it looks on mobile. And so a lot of nonprofits have responsive websites. That means the website scales to scale down on a mobile phone. But if you haven't really optimized it for mobile, can I read the text? Is it scaled down where it's still readable? A lot of times you have to, tweak what it looks like on a phone so that key message on your homepage, that key message on a donate page, key message on a virtual conference page, like it's readable. And the core message is what I see first. I can't tell you how many websites I go to where there's an image, it's beautiful, but if the first thing I see on the phone is just your navigation and an image, I know nothing about the fact that I should stay on this page. I might jump off because I don't see anything relevant to me yet. And so your mobile needs to reverse and put the core message first. We called it H1 as that headline. That's the most important thing on the page. That has to be really visible. It has to be something that connects with me and says, that's interesting, tell me more. If it doesn't, I've already jumped off the site. And then you need to really think through your links. So a lot of times mobile sites have scaled down the links and they don't have all of them coming over, or they've not thought about it from a mobile phone. So I've seen people where they have a teeny little button up here that I'm supposed to be able to press, but I can't press it without it going to the wrong link. That's a frustrating experience. And now Google will downgrade our websites for that. So really it's all about, getting on your phone, looking at what your website looks like is the most important message there on every site. Would this make me want to read more? Scroll down this page, click on another page. That's the level of engagement they're looking for. And to come up and search, you have to think through what would people search for related to our mission. So sometimes they're searching for a question. So you should have some content on your blog of answering some key questions that relate to your mission and the problem you're solving in the world. So, so you really want to be thinking about, the mobile experience. It's got to be great, but also what would people search on that you want to be known for? And then you can use keyword research tools where you can see, okay, this is the term I think they would search on. How much traffic does that get? Okay, so 100 people a month search for that. Is that enough? Maybe I want the term where 5,000 people a month search for it. Now, again, if the term is so valuable to you that I want to be known to all of those 100 a month that search on that, then you want to optimize for that term. There's a balance because the ones that more people search on, there'll be more competitiveness for rating for that term. But really, there's no gaming the system anymore. It's all about thinking strategically about what questions, what do we want to be known for? What are we experts in? People that care about this, problem we solve in society, what would they look for? And us having valuable content that would give those people answers and make us trust that we're an authority on that topic, that we can solve that. And after they land, you need that core message in one line. And then it could be another line, that whole, it's a series of messages that tells my story. And then they want to see a video, and then they want to hear a donor talking, and then they want to hear someone in the community that received the impact saying how valuable it was. So it's a mix of engagement, but you really have to prioritize kind of what gets told in the story first, and how do you make it in a way that they want to keep engaging on the website. And I think that we have one more question. Let's see.
Yeah, about the donate function.
Okay, so you certainly want your core call to action to be prominent in your navigation. I would even say it's in the top navigation. So if you have like 5 kind of core main navigation, you know, here's our story, here's our program impact, you know, here's the contact us. Above that, you want to have contact us, donate, whatever the call to actions are that you think you want to drive them to immediately. They should be the easiest thing to find on your website, and they should be on every page at the top of your site. That donate button, you don't want it to be large and obnoxious, but it needs to be easy to find in the top right corner, and it needs to be easy to click on mobile. So you need to space it out from anything else you would click on so that I don't accidentally click the wrong thing.
And I'll tag on there to see that in the chat, I saw the word, you know, we don't want to be annoying. Right. We need to put that out of our mind as nonprofits, regardless of who you are in that nonprofit, staff member, board member. Part of the culture of philanthropy of a nonprofit is that we're not embarrassed to ask for donations because it's for the good of the organization. So when you see a donate button, what I want a prospective donor to think is, they're giving me an opportunity to support this work that I care about. And I think that's what we as fundraisers, as staff members and board members need to think about. So as a fundraiser, a long time ago, working in-house, asking for the gifts all the time, I put it out of my head. I am not annoying. I am here to promote this organization that I believe so deeply in, and I'm going to give people the opportunity to invest in this amazing work we're doing.
Yeah. Well, Susan, I'm glad you used the word invest, because that's the word I use more than donate anyway. I think that as our generations will shift, we're moving from a baby boomer generation that was about donations, and now these future generations are more about investing. So less transactional relationship of I'm going to give my money to nonprofits and see what they do with it, but more I'm going to give the money as an investment, and I want to be part of that exchange. I want to be part of that mission.
Absolutely. And I think you should not underestimate the power of what else someone can do besides giving you dollars.
Exactly.
So certainly we make it easy for them to donate online, but what else would be valuable? So make it easy for them to volunteer, make it easy for them to share, you know, this article, make it easy for them to invite other people to this virtual town hall that we're doing. You know, so we want to think about we are creating people that are advocates for what we're solving in the community, and how can they help us? How can we be a network of thousands of people trying to achieve this versus a few of us? And I'd like to close there since we're 10 minutes over time, and just thank everybody. Remind everyone there will be a follow-up email later today. You'll get the slides, you'll get the recording of the video, and you'll get an infographic summary of the survey results. You'll have all of the speakers' contact information. So if you have a question that you'd still like to ask, feel free to email them and they'll answer it via email. And I'd like to just thank all of our panelists, Susan, John, Suzanne. You guys have contributed so much to give us some great insights on how we can reset for 2021 so we can achieve great things in our community and great impact. And I'd like to thank the partners who made this possible. So we had a lot of partners who helped with outreach in terms of promoting the survey, promoting the webinar, and we really appreciate how broad you got this out. So we had over 400 people take the survey and participate in this webinar, and many more who helped in terms of sharing it with their networks. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you all.
Everybody, thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
Stay in touch.
Take care.